So, I bet of the deals I look at, well over 50% end up with some kind of seller financing, albeit the bank, obviously, if there's a bank involved, the bank will have the seller subordinate to the bank debt. But for the right deal, it's really beneficial to both sides. So what do you guys see?
Yeah, so for one thing, the SBA almost always requires some seller financing. But one of the things that we run into with sellers is when you say the word seller financing, the first thing that pops into their head, I think, is, oh, you want me to finance someone who can't get money at the bank. You're wanting me to take someone that has subprime credit and finance my company to them. I don't want to do that. And the next thing that pops into their head is, well, what happens if they default? So they're thinking like a banker, Mary Beth. What's the worst case scenario? And that's okay. So what we need to help them understand is that we can structure the deal so that they have as much protection as possible, and that it may make sense for them to finance somebody that the bank would love to finance. We won't ask them to finance somebody the bank doesn't want. We want them to finance somebody all the banks are dying to do. And so by doing that, we can give them some really good advantages on a tax basis and an ongoing basis. And as Carl said earlier, a lot of sellers would rather have the income than the money.
Don, I often say to the sellers that, heck, it's a much better deal. And if they can get part of it cash up front, and then especially if they're retiring, then it's pretty much like an annuity. I mean, if it's a 7-year or a 10-year deal, it's just like having an annuity at a higher rate. It's not like they can get a lot of interest these days. So it seems to work really well for both sides.
It really does. And remember, we talked about goodwill earlier. Mary Beth, how many lenders will finance goodwill as a standalone?
I wouldn't like to answer that.
So who's going to finance the goodwill value? Well, Mr. Seller, it's going to need to be you. You want to get paid for it? Well, it's goodwill, and the goodwill is an intangible asset. Owner financing is the way that most sellers get paid for the goodwill of their business. Now, sometimes if you talk to the SBA, and by the way, just for those who aren't familiar, that's the Small Business Administration, which is a guarantee to the lenders of a percentage of the value of that loan. The SBA says they will finance because they say they're a cash flow lender, but they're not. The banks are going to want some collateral, but goodwill is a way to get that financed. And it really helps bridge that gap between the hardest assets and collateral of a business and the real value of the business, which includes the goodwill and other